Welcome to Not Silent Podcast. Today I'm joined by Jane Olson, a lifelong human rights advocate who spent decades standing with survivors of war, violence, and repression, often long before the world was paying attention. Jane has worked at the highest level of human rights leadership, including with Human Rights Watch and the Landmine Survivor Network, always pushing to center survivors' voices and demand accountability. I want to begin not with institutions or titles, but with Jane and your personal experience. How did you get into this field of human rights globally?
Well, it certainly wasn't a planned life path. I've been doing a lot of speaking to colleges and universities since I wrote a book recently. And I always tell students, pay attention to what comes your way. Pay attention to invitations that are offered to you, because you never know, if you accept an invitation, where that might lead. And that was certainly my case. I was asked, would you like to go to the former Yugoslavia? It was Yugoslavia at the time. There's a terrible war going on, and women and children are being especially brutalized. There's a huge number of refugees, and this was a woman that I knew in Los Angeles. She said, I want to go see how they're being treated and what we might do to help them. And it turned out she was with the Women's Refugee Commission, actually was part of the International Rescue Committee at the time. And I said, I'd love to do that. I drove through Yugoslavia, back in early 70s when my husband was a student at Oxford. We traveled all over, and I always thought the Dalmatian coast was so beautiful and the Yugoslav people so lovely and kind and generous. So I said, I'd love to go with you. Well, little did I know where that would lead, and the long commitment that I've had to that war and also to the organization.
You coming from the Western country and me coming from that part of the world, we know the importance of international presence. I experienced war in Kosovo in 1999. We were there. We were all looking towards West. And when NATO intervened, I remember that night, we were happy. And we didn't know how long it's going to last. Then genocide happened meanwhile. Now today I understand also what is happening in other parts of the world, because when you experience yourself. But do you see that the role of international presence changed from the time when you actually were seeing firsthand the crisis to comparing to these days?
In some ways, yes, but I would like to think that it's still of great concern, and that there are organizations absolutely committed to the kind of work that I did back in those days. I think the politics have changed, but I don't think people's sense of compassion and empathy and wanting to make a difference has changed. It's just that we need to provide opportunities and experiences for people. To me, it's, there's the politics, there's the logistics of the war, the international relations, and so on. It's always about the people. And I think that you can't really understand a war unless you talk to people on the ground and understand what they have experienced and what their conditions are.
You said politics has changed. In what term you mean politics has changed? What has changed with politics?
Well, I think in my country, the United States, we have a president, and I don't mind being highly critical of him. One of his first acts was to eliminate international aid, which was a huge, huge part of what nonprofit organizations worked with. The international aid that was given through organizations like CARE and the IRC and other humanitarian organizations, they received probably 40% of their budgets from the U.S. government International Aid Fund. there's no way that the private sector can make up for that loss of funding. You know, it's millions and millions of dollars. And so that's changed from the top. I don't think in terms of nonprofit organizations it's changed, but there's a real scramble for funding the kind of work that needs to be done.
And funding mostly goes to women and children because these are mostly attacked during the war and crisis. We had in Kosovo 20,000 women raped, and the
It's
rape
probably more
itself,
than that.
yes, and the other on other conflict zones, it's used as an arm to against women. Uh, do you see that the awareness is declining when it comes to, especially this category, how women are being treated? Because we see how they are being treated also in Western countries, so not just in the third world countries.
Well, in all of the war zones that I went into, and all of the situations that I was aware of, at least 80% of the victims were women and children. That's why I became very involved with the Women's Refugee Commission that worked. It used to be called the Women's Commission for Refugee Women and Children. 80% of refugees were women because the men either were killed or they were sent off to fight, defend their country. And women will always be victimized because one of the rape is not about sex. It's not about pleasure. It's about power and control, humiliation, and it's about hurting someone. And I think it's hard to imagine, especially in cultures like we encountered in the former Yugoslavia, being the victim of rape could ruin a woman's life forever.
Yes, and we are seeing, since you worked also with a refugee committee, what is happening in the United States, but also in Europe, thousands of immigrants and refugees are being killed, basically. You see what is happening in Greece, they are left in the sea. Meanwhile, you see people also, Europeans, having an anger against immigrants, the protest against them. I remember when the war in Syria happened over 10 years ago, we were covering this, we went to interview. We were all shocked because what were presented to media and we interviewing them, most of them educated, most doctors, engineers, speaking perfectly English, went to Europe. Now it's created like an image of anti-immigration, not just politics, but that's why people are helping the race of the right wing as well. So it's happening globally, not just in one country. What happened?
Well, that's true. Let me just give you an example. I grew up in a very small town in Iowa, right in the middle of the country, the heartland of the country. It's mostly agriculture. Everything in my small town, which was fewer than 5,000 people, related to the farm, to agriculture, food production of some kind. When I was in high school, we had one black family, no foreigners. It was really all white. I go back there now because I still have family and concerns about the welfare of that region. We support the newspaper there, for instance. And 65% of the people in my hometown now speak English as a second language. So I understand how that impacts the local people and frightens them. They feel like they're losing their culture. Even those who embrace and employ immigrants and understand the need for them and their value, it's unsettling. The change happened quite fast. And the reason is my hometown had two packing plants come in, a beef packing plant, a pork packing plant. And they paid very low wages for very hard, tough, dirty, dangerous work. So the white farm boys quit. And they had to import people mostly from Mexico to do that work at low wages. If it hadn't been for the immigration of people from Mexico and Central America, the town would have died. They've sustained the town. They've made it prosperous. But my high school now has a mariachi marching band, has the only Spanish language newspaper in the state of Iowa. And I think that's fabulous. It's exciting, but it is a change, and change can be unsettling to people. I do understand it.
I want to go back especially to Europe, since we had a large number of Middle Eastern immigrants and refugees that came, and the worry especially of the countries which they're based Christianity. And we have seen in Middle East what is happening in Iran, what is happening in Afghanistan. I have interviewed the first Afghan pilot. She immigrated a few years ago in the United States, of course, living under the terror of Taliban and what's happening in Iran and other Middle Eastern places. We had also those refugees coming, and the discourse built by politicians that they are trying this culture or this religion is trying to do the cultural impact. How do you see this discourse of the especially right-wing politics in the Western?
Well, the sad thing is, they are holding the Bible and beating people with the Bible, but they're not reading the Bible. If they're Christians, the whole message of Jesus Christ was about love and acceptance and the oneness, the sameness of all humanity. And I think people, unfortunately, as the human species, we have evolved very slowly from the caveman days, I guess. But people do look for differences, in part because they want to feel superior to the other. But religion should be something that binds and joins people, because essentially they're all talking about spirit, they're all talking about God. They have different principles, different guidelines, different holy books, but essentially it's all about love. Love is the center.
But it's also women historically, because we're not going to talk about religion much. They are oppressed by religion, and see what is happening in name of Christianity. They are not the abortion law, anti-abortion law, but see what is happening in Middle East in name of religion. What happened to the women in Afghanistan? Millions of girls are not allowed to go to school. So knowing that, as you've mentioned, working in the places where is war and crisis, those are the first to be attacked by men in name of religion. We have Turkish president, who also holds Quran, and he cannot be questioned being as a religious leader, but you have 800 women with small children in prison. So most of them use religion to oppress. Do we need to have secular institutions and not let religion involve into our society, keep in mind what is happening to the most vulnerable category of the society?
Everything you said is correct, and when the religious teachings are misused in that way, I think God weeps. They're just using the difference and misreading the principles of their faith in order to have power over. No, I don't think we should eliminate religion, but I think it needs to be evolved to the place where people actually understand it as community, as love. I mean, I think traditions are important. Family is important. The father beats the mother and the children, but you don't want to get rid of the family institution. And I do think that anything that brings people together is important, but it, like skin color and gender and so on, those who want to do harm look for differences and want to feel superior. Nowhere in the Quran and nowhere in the Bible does it give people any right to suppress women and children. It's complete misreading.
Yeah, by male, by men.
Well, here's something I want to tell you. I'm a feminist. I mean, you can see it, you can hear it. I am a very, very strong, committed feminist. I have 8 grandsons. I have no granddaughters. I have 8 grandsons. So I can't say that it's men. It is specific people, specific leaders who are cruel, but I'm raising boys who love and support and protect women. And so it's hard. I can't, I used to say men, even though I had a loving husband and a loving father, but I understand now it's not the gender, it's the specific bad actors.
Yeah, when I mentioned religion, is from the experience also personal. You know, we were in the war, the genocide happened in Kosovo. We, for us, Muslim, Christian, didn't matter. We were all being killed.
I know.
After the
I saw it.
war, after the war, these big powers, they took advantage because it came up after the war. The poverty was high, so of course it's easy to spread with every kind of ideology that you want. When you're poor, you don't have awareness what's happening. So they came, they brought under charity purposes. And imagine Kosovo, one of the most pro-American country. We have statues of Tony Blair, Madeleine Albright. We named kids after Madeleine Albright. But what happened?
She is very worthy of that. She was an excellent Secretary of State.
She was, it had a major role in the NATO intervene. What happened? So we had seen the increase of number of extremist groups. Kids, children of the families who are very pro-American in West, because you're gonna have idols based off your historical perspective and when you are saved by Americans, of course you're gonna be pro-American. Now their kids became radicalized by these groups. That it was not our Islam. It's something that was important. They were saying to us, "You are not good enough Muslims. This is not Islam." I'm taking this as an example because it happens also in other parts of the world. When it's high poverty in many parts of Africa, in Middle East, women and children. In Kosovo, they started working with children, and now they are married, they have families. And in 2014, 300 men and women joined ISIS. Who would say we were not paying attention? In name of freedom of religion, what happened? We had the largest number by the population being, so it's sad. That's what I'm trying to say. What is happening? How can this happen? Where is the problem? How can we prevent? Because who is being attacked at the end are women and children. Right now in Syria, you had women and children who are in ISIS camps. They were victims because they went there not knowing after their husbands what is happening. They cannot go back to their home countries. They are suffering. Their kids are suffering. So it's just as an example globally what is happening in different parts of the world.
Well, when I was doing the work, of course, I looked to the United Nations. My heroine, my role model, was Eleanor Roosevelt, who championed the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. I carried the booklets of the Universal Declaration with me everywhere I went, and in many of the refugee camps, I handed them out to women. They had no idea that they had these rights. And I think that the current administration in the United States has no respect for the rule of law or for the UN or for our global alliances, for instance, NATO. And yet it is those basic institutions and principles that in the end will save us. I'm absolutely convinced.
Right now there are a lot of crises happening. Sudan, still Yemen is suffering, Middle East. What is the role of current administration and also Europe? As you said, if we destroy our relationship with our allies, which are EU members, what is your prediction? What is going to happen?
Well, we're desperate for leadership at the moment. I think women are going to rise up. That's my prediction, because we're bearing babies. I think it's a great burden is falling on the non-governmental organizations that I've worked with. I told you Human Rights Watch, the IRC, and the Women's Refugee Commission, Landmine Survivors Network and other organizations like that that I have worked with, because we have to raise the money and we have to do the work. The government is AWOL. I also do think that one of the most important and most hopeful things that I've done is working with an ecumenical religious group. I mean, here in Los Angeles, the Christians, Jews, and Muslims from the Islamic Center came together. It was one of the first things that I was asked to do. It was during the nuclear crisis, when U.S. and the Soviet Union had nuclear weapons and were mass producing nuclear weapons. There was such a tremendous threat to the survival of the world. And all three institutions, Christians, Jews, and Muslim leaders here in Los Angeles, got together and said, this is an existential crisis. We must focus on stopping and reversing the nuclear arms race. The nuclear arms race is going to kill us. Yeah. And we came together, and then we did a huge conference. It was a 2-day conference and brought together leaders from all over the country and from the several international to talk about basically the theological imperative to stop the nuclear weapon production. And then we started a center called the Interfaith Center to Reverse the Arms Race, and I chaired that for many years. And that's how I got into, traveling and meeting people from the former Soviet Union. It was the Soviet Union then. I went to Ukraine twice and to Russia. We had Soviet citizens come and stay in our homes. It was a people-to-people kind of program. And I absolutely believe in the role of common everyday citizens in keeping the peace.
And if we take it in a psychological dimension also, when you talk to them on the ground, you just get a different impression. Even when you go to the conflict zones, when you have the enemies, talk to the people, getting them together. But we were talking about cutting the funds that happen from the UN and all these humanitarian organizations. Do you think that these gaps are going to be filled by other powers?
The funding gap for humanitarian aid?
Yes.
I think it's impossible for anyone to step up with the kind of commitment that the U.S. had because of the size of our budget, and we were always the leaders in humanitarian work. Others will step up to fill the void, and nonprofit organizations will, but it's impossible to make up the difference for what President Trump just cut and eliminated. And he's also cutting all kinds of programs for women and children in the U.S., domestic as well as international programs.
Yeah, because Europe doesn't have capacity, but also for example, as Qatar is a very rich country, are there going or China or some other powers, are they going to try to take advantage of these gaps to fill the gap financially and take advantage on their own agenda?
By taking advantage, you mean getting credit and getting more influence?
Exactly, getting more influence, political influence.
Well, as long as people are fed and they're not dying, I think that's a good goal. I worry about their hearts and minds later, but we have to save their bodies. I would love to see someone step up and do basic food and medical aid to replace what the U.S. has abandoned.
But with an hidden agenda, if what happened in Kosovo and Bosnia, I think that the consequences in the long term are going to be...
That's right. You're absolutely right about that. But until we get a change of leadership, people are going to be dying.
What can change the leadership? Awareness of people?
Well, I think it's going to change very soon, but I don't want to get into domestic politics.
I want your opinion into the women movement. I don't see that much of the cooperation of the United States with the EU organization when it comes to immigration, when it comes to the major crisis that we are facing. What is happening? Is it the lack of funds, or there is something else? Like, we didn't see any protests on women being killed by Iranian regime. We didn't see any kind of reaction to what was happening in some parts of.
Well, I did, but then I'm tuned into nonprofit organizations and non-governmental organizations. No, I would say the majority of American people are good people and care about the world and understand that the fate of someone living in a country that's at war is connected to our fate.
They asked me why I chose to move in the United States, and I'm going to tell you exactly why. While I was being threatened writing about corruption and religious extremism, the only door open to me was U.S. Embassy. There were diplomats that said to me, take your kids and come into our apartments, or I went to police reporting the threats. No one really did anything. So we know the importance of having support of United States. In our mind is there is freedom.
Right.
That's the door where we should seek safety. We are gathered today in LA to honor women from across the world, and for the first time this year, there hasn't been awards for women courage, for the Woman of Courage Award, which this started in 2007.
Right.
How do you see this? It's very painful. I interview these women. There are over 200 that received this award. They put their own
They're the best
family
of the best.
in danger, and what they are doing. I'm not saying it's easy, but I can make the comparison of when you work from the home country and when you work from the exile. It's totally different. So how much this is going to affect all these women that are living under the death threats every day?
Well, it's a very dangerous time, very, very dangerous time. But the American Women for International Understanding, who is hosting the event, and you're one of the honorees, an alum, you were honored in the past. Those, the Women of Courage were always selected in the past by people in the U.S. State Department who, from the Embassy Corps, recognized and selected women who showed extraordinary heroism and deserved to be honored as you did. I mean, your story is amazing. Makes me cry, but I can't cry out in front of the camera. But so they've cut that program, U.S. State Department. Let's hope it'll be reinstated.
What I consider this cutting of this fund or this support will open the door to all the authoritarian regimes to increase oppression against women, because in all the countries where there is U.S. Embassy, if there is a name everybody is knowing that has courage, but knowing that that person has the support of the United States, it would stop all it. So it would give you protection.
Yes.
Now there is not, in the lack of this, there is not going to be protection, which means they're going to be in higher danger. Mm-hmm. But after everything you've seen, what still gives you hope? If
you
anything.
Do. You give me hope. Well, I honestly believe that there is more goodness in this world than hatred and fear. One of the things that's happened is we haven't talked about the distribution of wealth. Yeah. The distribution of wealth in this country is obscenely imbalanced. And it always has been in the world. That the United States, and followed by countries in Europe, China, Russia, should have so much wealth and power and size, territory. While small countries who are doing excellent work, and have geniuses always inventing things and making the world a better place, the balance is way off. And I think if you look at a map, you can kind of see why.
Yeah.
And that is something that I think needs to be. I'm not saying we break up the United States into 50 states instead of one country, but I'm saying that we need to right the imbalance of wealth and power by being more generous and being healers around the world, as has been our tradition. The embassies have always been safe havens.
Always. I remember when I got here the first year, I started working at the Organization on Human Rights, and one of the research was about poverty in the United States. And the numbers were 15 million children go
Right.
hungry to sleep. Who would believe? Because for us, coming from other parts of the world, you would never believe that this number is this high in the United States.
Yes. It's shocking, and it's certainly not Christian or Jewish or Muslim faith. I mean, I think it's a imbalance that needs to be redressed at some point.
You've
I
mentioned,
also know many, maybe not many, but several billionaires who give vast amounts and vast fractions of their wealth for humanitarian human rights and good causes.
you've mentioned that still there is humanity among people. So the last question. So in today's world, in the United States and other parts of the world, what does real courage look like? So not just for leaders, because we are seeking for better leaders, but also for ordinary people.
Well, my definition of courage has always been the ability and the willingness to speak truth to power. But I think we must speak up, speak our truth. One of the reasons that I went all over the world with these organizations was that I could see for myself, and I could talk not just about statistics, but I could give personal stories. And I learned that, if you talk about 50 million babies going to bed hungry, people roll their eyes and yawn. But if you talk about one child, one baby, one family, one mother struggling to feed her children, people will say, oh, we have to do something.
Yeah.
It's important to personalize it. Figures and statistics are mind-numbing. But that's why I wrote my book with personal stories of people that I met in the field.
If you would ask me if I regret coming to the United States, I would say I would never choose any other place in the world to go and seek refuge, because of people like you and many other people that helped me and my kids since the first day I came here, not just as in seeking for political asylum, but also during the war in Kosovo. I still believe in the goodwill of people in this country. So if you stop someone in the street, they're going to try and help you.
Right?
I still believe in this,
Yes.
no matter who's going to be at the administration.
Thank you. I do too. And I know eventually we'll get it right. We usually end up doing the right thing. I think your role as a journalist is to get your message out there. I was trained in journalism also. And, people listen to the programs that he generates and read his social media, and they think that's the truth. You saw what happened in the streets in Minnesota, though. People came to the defense of the people that were being captured.
But still, those people who are going in the street to defend these immigrants are Americans. So still, these Americans, these citizens, are getting in the street
Right.
in support of...
Well, the truth is, Americans are all immigrants. The only natives were Native American Indians. They're the only natives. We're all immigrants. It's just like which decade and which generation did you come in?
Yes, it's just... I'm telling you, going through all this process and reading and writing every day what is happening across the world, and especially in the democracy countries, because that's where we always look forward. as you mentioned, during the 90s, 80s, 70s, especially during the 90s, you've been a part of all this organization. I'm grateful for each of you who've done work, and I am alive today because of your commitment, and we hope for better days for all the countries that are suffering right now. And I know the pain that they have, and they are looking towards us, towards this country for help. So we wish for the better days, and I thank you for everything you have done.
I appreciate that. Thank you for coming to the U.S.
Thank you. Thank you.
I hope we'll make you proud.
Thank you. You will, and you had. Thank you so
Okay.
much.